Today will feature WELC Executive Director Erik Schlenker-Goodrich presenting on Emergent Horizons, WELC's new long-range strategic effort to move beyond resistance and towards regeneration. In a time of cascading ecological and political crises, learn how WELC is grounding its legal work in kinship, courage, and intergenerational responsibility, fighting not just against injustice, but for the wild, the sacred, and the yet to come. So also a little bit of background on Erik here for those of you that aren't familiar. Erik joined WELC as a staff attorney in 2003 and became executive director in 2012. He has fought in court before both regulatory agencies and legislatures to safeguard our climate from dirty fossil fuels, promote our transition to clean energy future, and protect the rivers and wildlands of the Western U.S. Born and raised on the Hudson River in upstate New York, Erik has lived in the West since 1996, ultimately putting down roots in northern New Mexico, where he is raising a family and exploring the region's amazing landscape. Erik is a graduate of Cornell University with a BS in Natural Resources and concentration in American Indian Studies, and earned his law degree and a certificate in Environmental and Natural Resources Law from the University of Oregon School of Law. And with that, we can go ahead and get started. And first, I'm going to hand it over to WELC's Development Director, Jenna Klopel. And Jenna, if you want to give a quick message, and then we'll get started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our call today. As Michelle said, I'm Jenna Armijo Kleppel, the Development Director here at WELC. And I wanted to share a little bit about our organization before we jump into Erik's talk today. So you're going to hear more from Erik, specifically how we're turning our vision of the West into reality. We do that through advocacy and with steadfast vision, and we hope to serve as an antidote to the anxiety-inducing reality that we all know too well today as the face, or rather as government and natural world is in chaos around us. I wanted to provide a little bit of organizational background before Erik starts today. We have at WELC a team of 21 attorneys and advocates, and together those individuals bring more than 300 years of experience to WELC. It's this incredible wealth of expertise that has formed WELC for the totality of our 30-year history. So over that time, over that 30 years, we've protected more than 10 million acres of lands from the ravages of oil and gas fracking. We've secured conservation protections for iconic wildlife such as grizzly bears, Canada lynx, wild salmon, wolverines, and gray wolves. In order to continue the work at the high standard we've set for ourselves, we rely largely on support from our donors. And I hope that you all tuning in today will consider making a gift to WELC this August, during which some of our business supporters are matching gifts made by individuals up to a total of $5,000. That gives you, our supporters, the opportunity to double your impact to help WELC in working towards our mission of defending the West. So as you listen to Erik's overview of our strategic vision, remember that we are in this together. We do have the power to create change together, and together we can and will make a difference. And with that, I'll hand it over to Erik.
Hey, folks. It's really wonderful to see everybody here today, to have the chance to engage you all in conversation. Also, really wonderful to see a lot of names and folks that I know and have the privilege and honor of working with. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy days to join us today. This is going to be a little bit of a different conversation. I know that there's an immense amount of work that is underway right now, in particular fighting back against the Trump administration. And what I hope to leave you with today is the idea that the Western Environmental Law Center, that we are very much in this fight, that we are holding the line against the Trump administration. But even as we do that, we have reached a conclusion that that defensive action is alone insufficient, that what we need to be doing right now is conceiving of where we want to be in the future, and to think about very fundamental change from the extraction-based system we are living within now that I think is running into its logical dead end, and towards a living system where the values that I suspect most of the folks on this Zoom, those are the values that you care about. Whether we're talking about public lands or wildlife protection or climate action. And that even though the moment we are in is so perilous and so terrible, that in a counterintuitive way, it is perhaps opening up possibilities. It is not the kind of dynamic or situation that I have chosen, that I suspect anyone here has chosen, certainly not the Western Environmental Law Center has chosen, but it is our lived reality in this moment. And so I think trying to hold two things at once, the idea that we need to fight, but the idea that we also need to create, that those two things go hand in hand. So let me share my slide deck. And unfortunately, I think it reverted back into presenter mode here, but we will mangle our way through it in presenter mode. If I can perhaps find. All right, I think that took care of it there.
Friend Erik.
Right on. So we're calling the work we're doing, in particular the creative work that we're doing on this front, Emergent Horizons. And the Emergent Horizons is a recognition that we are at work in the ruins of U.S. democracy and the current. Uh, I'm assuming my screen is still sharing. It says that it's paused. Michelle or
Yeah,
Jenna,
I
can you
can
just?
still see it.
Okay, great.
Where's
So
the
apologies for that.
page though?
What's that?
We're on your title page.
Okay. And so in the ruins of this moment, even if you set aside the Trump administration, the work that we care about, constraining human society within our planetary boundaries, and constraining is perhaps the wrong word, because I think that there is a freedom in the recognition of limits, of living within our limits as human beings, and that the Earth, it helps provide a sense of humility to who we are. And as we think about the planetary boundaries that we work within as a species, as a society, we are very much starting to exceed these boundaries because of our human behavior. The trajectory that we have had over the last 2 decades is one that is sobering to contemplate. Stockholm Resilience Center has done a really good job of identifying what these core planetary boundaries are. And as of 2023, when they refreshed their analysis, found that we have crossed 6 of those boundaries. This was in 2023 before Trump administration came back into power for its second term. And when Trump won in November and then was inaugurated in January, I think a lot of us felt this sense of what do we do? And a sense of all the work that we have been doing, all the strategies, all the tactics that we have employed in past years, that those are not sufficient in this moment. They provide guidance, but they are not alone sufficient. And so a lot of what I did, and part of this was my own mechanism for working through how I felt about it, processing the reality that I was about to raise my family in a second Trump administration, that much of the work that I have done, much of the value, many of the values that I deeply care about were now under threat. Went a little deeper, tried to go to deeper currents of thinking to not simply react to the moment, but to, again, try to find a creative footing for myself. And as I did this, I started to read a lot. And one of the books that I read during this time was a book called At Work in the Ruins by Dugald Heim. And the basic notion was that the systems that we have lived with for the past century or two, they are in fact in ruins. He wrote this book before the Trump administration came back for its second term, but as a function of the climate crisis, as a function of the pandemic, they were demonstrating that the systems we had were no longer sufficient. And not only were they no longer sufficient, that they were unraveling in many respects. So how do we address this sort of dynamic? N.K. Jemisin, who is a science fiction writer, brings to mind this notion that all of us, even lawyers, and I saw that there was a question that somebody had submitted in registration about, are lawyers the ones who lawyers are really good at stopping things in this moment? Are we actually folks that can help chart a new pathway? And I think the answer is yes, given the work that we do within the organization. And so I love this notion that lawyers at a law firm, that an advocacy organization, and all that network of partnerships we have, many of whom are on this meeting, that we can be creators in this moment, in these ruins that we are finding ourselves in. And as all of these systems unravel around us, if we can network together, if we can connect in relationship and kinship with each other, that we can create these islands of coherence amidst the chaos, and that those islands of creation, those islands of coherence become islands of creation to help figure out what is the world that we want and how do we get to that place. That's really scary to think about. The idea that we are not going to go back to anything resembling American democracy as it existed prior to President Donald Trump, because it's an unknown. It invokes immense amount of uncertainty. But the way will appear, and I feel confident in that. And again, I feel confident in the notion that the more we step onto that pathway, the more those possibilities will open. That opportunities seized are opportunities that can multiply. And I thought a lot about this over my summer vacation when I had a chance to eddy out from the day-to-day trials and tribulations of the work we are doing in this moment. I had the chance to spend some time in my home state of New York, where I was born. And I went into New York City. And in New York City, for folks who are familiar with it, there's the High Line, which is a basically garden parkway set of pathways that is built on the ruins of the old rail infrastructure that went into New York City and down into the meatpacking district. Those rail lines are now these elevated trails and parks with restaurants nearby and all this really wonderful architecture. And it just gave me this sense of possibility that despite all this old infrastructure that is now in ruins, and thinking not just physical infrastructure, but thinking about that political infrastructure and democratic infrastructure we have, that we can build something new from that. Other chance I thought about that is far more personal to me. I didn't spend much time in New York City as a kid. I grew up in upstate New York on the Hudson, in a little town called Coxsackie. And every year when I get to go back there, and I went back there this year, I love to paddle across to the other side of the river with my family. And the image on the right is an image, and you can see all the overhanging greenery, but then underneath that, right on the river's edge, all these old docks, and there were brickyards and ice docks and ferry docks. All of that is gone. All of that is in ruins. But the
Eric,
three groups,
your slides aren't going. Sorry to
they
interrupt.
are not.
No, you're still on your title page, and I know you were there for
Ah,
me, but
what is going on here then? Let me stop sharing.
Michelle, maybe can you jump in with Eric's slideshow and he can just verbally tell you when to move forward?
yeah, I'm happy to if that's easier, Eric.
Yeah, why don't you, if you have it handy, why don't you do that?
All right.
Apologies, folks. We are running into too many technical difficulties today, which is a function of the technology that is increasingly taking over our lives. Um, but I grew up on the Hudson River, and Andrew, who mentioned this in the chat, I spoke about this at a convening that we had earlier this year. This was a river that when I was born was heavily polluted with PCBs and other toxic contaminants that were put into the Hudson River by industrial development in the upper part of the Hudson River in Albany, but all that old infrastructure in that picture that I was alluding to, that hopefully you will get a chance to see. And I know that within my body, some of those poisons may exist. But I also know that because of the Clean Water Act, because of the work people did to clean up that river, that river now has a chance not just to heal, but to thrive. And when I go back and I paddle on the Hudson River, I am seeing all of that thriving in the river with bald eagles and blue heron and osprey. I sat on my backyard this summer and watched an osprey and a bald eagle duel in the air with the eagle trying to chase this osprey away and this osprey protecting its nest and circling around its nest that was built on a lighthouse that was in the river across from my house. So in thinking about, there were a couple quotes there in the beginning that I will flip through. Oh, here we go with the screen. But I just want to leave folks with this sense of possibility in this moment. So again, we are at work in the ruins. This quote from Dugald Hine, this acknowledgement is letting go of past ideas of what we can be as a country so that we can embrace new ways of thinking and new ways of ordering ourselves. And so here are those images that I referenced, the one on the left, the High Line in New York City, where you now have this thriving set of gardens and parks and pathways on old rail lines. And on the right, this image of a forest on the Hudson River growing up in the ruins of this old industrial infrastructure along the shores. And if you step back and zoom out from that particular image, fast forward, next slide, Michelle. Hopefully this will play. It's a little bit slow, but that's a lagoon that used to be an industrial lagoon. And now it is this thriving wetland. It is this thriving lagoon that feels as wild as any place I've ever been in the Rockies. Even though nearby there is also a river with commercial traffic and even industrial traffic moving along it. Next slide. And that's in my soul as a human being, and in many ways animates how I lead Western Environmental Law Center and how we're thinking about this moment, that how whatever the darkness may be, whatever the ruins of the moment we are in together, that there is another possibility. So what is that other possibility? So as a core precept, as we think about this, I showed this slide before, maybe you didn't see it because of technical difficulties, but this idea that there is an ecological ceiling in this world. We know about climate change, but also water depletion, ocean acidification, air pollution, and biodiversity loss. And so as we craft a new system of being on this earth, that is centered on people, that is centered on biological life and ecological systems, that we constrain our behavior within that ceiling. And through those constraints, we find liberation in who we are and we can craft governing systems accordingly. But also a social foundation for who we are as human beings, how we treat each other, making sure that we're treating each other with a sense of equity, with a sense of justice, making sure that we are providing basic necessities for people of food, water, and energy, of healthcare. These are things that may seem distant from climate action and environmental protection, but they are at the core of how we are going to be able to actually address the climate crisis, at the core of how we're going to be able to address the biodiversity crisis, because we are in kinship with each other as human beings, but also with the world around us. So if we're not taking care of ourselves as human beings, we cannot take care of the world and vice versa. Next slide. And so on the left side, you see this extractive economy, uh, which drives our extractive political systems in Congress. We have seen over the course of the last several years all these iterations, for example, of permitting reform, the idea that we need to build out immense amounts of material infrastructure, energy infrastructure of all sorts, fossil fuels, but also renewable energy, and that we need to unleash capital and technology industries to recreate our economy so that we may thrive. We reject this idea of an extractive economy, the political systems that are calibrated around and structured to further this kind of extractive economy. And that what we need to do is that we need to have a fundamental change in systems towards a living economy. That again, the way that we synthesize that way we distill that down to its essence is an ecology of kinship. Again, this idea that we are in this together as people and with the world around us. And so we use this model developed by the movement generation that was spearheaded by the Climate Justice Alliance about how we can make that fundamental system shift. And I think we're in a moment right now where that extractive economy is dying. We are seeing its end state. In many respects. And that what comes out of this, again, we're not going back to what was before. And there are basically two simple pathways, each one of which has, innumerable iterations. But one is more of an authoritarian government. In the United States, we see that authoritarian government right now. It is emerging, it is locking itself in, it is entrenching itself, and is very much aligned with big tech and with fossil fuel industries, and along with nativist entities that are premised on racism and dominance over an idea of kinship. And so we need to make that shift more to the living economy. Those are our choices right now, and we have no other choice. Next slide. So I want to talk about a bunch of core themes that we're playing with at the Western Environmental Law Center, and I want to emphasize we're in a conceptual stage with all of this. We're trying to think through what that living system looks like, what that kinship-based system looks like. And these are several of the core themes that we are starting to work on. And if you're one of our partner organizations, know that we want to hear from you, how you're approaching this moment, what your ideas are, and that we will be reaching out to you to vet these ideas with you over the course of the next several months, with the idea that we can build solidarity for the future, and that we can not only find real footing in the moment to fight back against the Trump administration, where we're saying no to their transgressions, where we're fighting back against bad legislative ideas, again, for example, permitting reform, but that we're also seeding the terrain for what comes next. And by keeping that long-term vision in mind, we know what and how to fight the bad things that are happening right now and to prioritize our limited resources. We have never been more stretched thin as an organization. Our capacity has never been in more demand as an organization. We've hired a couple new attorneys over the past 6 months. Every single one of those attorneys now has a completely full docket, and we continue to be stretched to our limits as an organization. And so we're thinking about how do we prioritize, and these core themes go to that. So let's talk a little bit about what those core themes are. First, in that upper left, a socially and ecologically just transition from that extractive economy to a living economy. And what this means to us is that we need to center people in climate action, and that we know that, yes, as we center people, we will need to build infrastructure, affordable housing, renewable energy, transmission lines, but that we can't do so at the expense of the people who depend on that infrastructure the most, and that they need to be centered in that conversation. And then we also know that as we build this new economy that is powered by renewable energy, that we cannot sacrifice ecological systems in the process. We need to hold all those things together in tension, but to work our way through those to find some measure of responsible balance. Second key thing is that there is a world independent of humanity, and that we need to protect ecological systems in their own right. There are places that deserve not to have a human footprint, that deserve to be left alone from human infrastructure, even good infrastructure like renewables. There are better places to locate that. So identifying landscapes where we can have an opportunity to have an intersectional conversation where we're looking to center people, but also center place and those biological and ecological values. And the idea here is not to have something imposed on us from DC or state capitals even, but to have a bottom-up conversation where the systems, the legal frameworks that we employ and rely on, the political institutions, the economic systems that we rely on are predicated on people and place. This sounds great. Let's get to a little bit more on the granular side of the equation. Transformation of agency missions. When we take a look at a lot of the problems at the federal level, much of it is grounded on the notion that agencies do not have clear missions. You take the Bureau of Land Management or the Forest Service, they operate under a multiple use mission. What does multiple use mean? It means hard rock mining, oil and gas development, motorized recreation, hunting, fishing, backpacking, wilderness protection, watershed protection. So there's a real opportunity that we can move forward on the basis of our values by clarifying these agency missions. This seems impossible right now, but I want to go back to the beginning and that idea that we need to cultivate a sense of possibility, and that even though in this moment everything seems impossible and everything seems terrible, there are other pathways that may open themselves up, and it is difficult to predict the future, and a good future only arises if we start to walk down, as Rumi says, that pathway. If we can clarify those agency missions, then that goes to the other concept that we're playing with. The idea that a clarification of the agency mission hems in and helps to structure what the best agency process is. There are these immense technical, super wonky debates right now about the National Environmental Policy Act. Is this a barrier to renewable energy deployment? Is it a tool for renewable energy deployment? Is it just a process without purpose, or is it a process with purpose? If we can clarify those agency missions, then we can clarify and calibrate process to support those agency missions. Fifth key prong is state capacity. The Trump administration, DOGE, has unraveled federal funding unconstitutionally, in my mind. They have defunded agencies. They have pushed out any possibility of dissent from career officials who have technical and scientific and institutional knowledge. They have outright destroyed many agencies. Other agencies have been completely infiltrated and co-opted by the industries that they purport or are supposed to regulate and oversee. And so when the Trump administration is gone, and it will inevitably be gone, how do we reimagine these agencies? How do we rethink the role of these agencies? How do we bring back fidelity to science and to evidence, but perhaps more importantly, to public interest values, to ensure that these state agencies, these federal agencies serve not industry, but the public writ large? And the last part feeds into that. For folks who have participated in agency decisions, and I suspect we have a group of folks here who has heeded the call of action alerts, whether from us or partner organizations, to provide a comment on a NEPA decision-making process or to show up at a particular hearing, whether legislative or rulemaking in nature. Those are really important processes. Notice and comment type processes. You are entitled to receive a draft of an environmental impact statement before it's finalized, so you can review it, provide your feedback on it. But we recognize those notice and comment processes are incomplete and inadequate, and that there are other models out there that we can embrace that are more participatory in nature, that are more authentic conversations between government officials and the public who is most impacted by those government decisions. And that's really exciting for us to move beyond what has become, frankly, a bit of a stale public participation process employed by the federal government, certainly, but also the state government. I often joke with my kids when they're around the house and they have a different perspective on what movie we should see or what we should have for dinner. And I sort of mirror the comment we often hear from government agencies, which is, thank you for your comment. We will take it under consideration and get back to you. We want something that is more participatory in nature, where people feel a sense of belonging in the decision that affects their lives. So these are six core themes that we're looking at. There's a lot under the hood of each one of these core themes that we are working through internally as an organization. I'm really excited. In a few weeks, we're going to get together and work our way through them at a full board and staff retreat. So, in terms of the timing of us releasing more detailed information, if you're one of our partner organizations that we work with, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We will be reaching out to you as well to start to vet these ideas. This is going to be a little bit like building the plane while flying it, because there will be very intensive legislative and regulatory fights that are already underway that we anticipate will arise in the coming months. Just before this meeting, I was on a call with about 100 advocates who were gearing up to fight the prospect of quote unquote bipartisan permitting reform, which is basically a strategy to further entrench fossil fuels, with Democrats hoping that they somehow are able to get some kind of concessions. We think that's a terrible idea. So we will have to be moving in space to defend against what's happening, but we do so with the idea that we are holding the line for something better, to be able to walk a pathway towards these emergent horizons. And these are these core themes that we're thinking about in this moment. Next slide. I want to end with this image, which is from Dugald Hines at work in the ruins, because I have found this to be grounding for me in a way that reading this book, and in particular this passage, I was able to work through my grief of where we are as a people and where we are as a country, to find a footing where I could exercise my creativity and imagination as a human being. And I feel fortunate because I get to run in a wonderful organization with a wonderful team that has power. We feel purpose built in this moment. It's not a moment we chose, but it is a moment that we can fight in, and it is a moment that we find purpose in. And this passage, for me personally, gives me a sense of purpose. And in Dugald Hines' book, he talks about the four kinds of work we can do in the ruins of this moment. The first is this idea that we can salvage good things that are still within these ruins, to pull out those things that were working really well. You think relative to modernity, the idea of medical technology like vaccines. These are things that we want to carry forward, of course. The second thing is to mourn what we can't take with us, that what is past. We're conscious of places that during this administration will be devastated, whether by fossil fuels development or other extractive industries, that communities that will suffer from the pollution caused by all of this activity, communities who have already been underserved and are overburdened by industrial exploitation of land and people. We know that. And so there is an element in this moment where we need to continue to grieve and to mourn and to honor what has been lost. The third thing, and this goes to what I referenced in the beginning, that whatever was around before the Trump administration, you even go back to those good old days of the Obama administration, it wasn't all that great. We have massive inequity in society. We have massive injustice in society. We were not addressing the climate crisis at a scale or a pace commensurate to the nature of that crisis. And so I think it's really important for us to look back and say there was no golden age. There was no point where America was great, and that it was always an experiment, something that an aspiration, something that we were always relentlessly seeking to improve. And I think we can embrace that notion as we move forward. The fourth area, the fourth kind of work is to look for those ideas that have been abandoned, that are nonetheless still in existence, that we can lift those up. We think about work that we've been doing on traditional ecological knowledge, how we can relate in kinship with the land, how we can think about different ways of living on the land and in our communities and with each other. So I'd encourage you to think about these four kinds of work that we are doing as an organization, but that you can do as an individual. So I'll leave it at that. Uh, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. This is a conversation that is incredibly present in my mind and that I am working through. I feel honored in this moment in a strange way because it is also a terrible moment, but to be able to think about these ideas and to put these ideas into play. It allows me to find, as a human being, a sense of purpose. And then hopefully through my leadership of the Western Environmental Law Center, a sense of purpose for the organization as a whole. So I welcome your thoughts. I welcome your questions.
Thank you so much, Erik, for all of that. And yeah, I just want to echo if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or comments or type it into the chat box, and we'd be happy to get to those.
I see Julie's question regarding alternative modes of fighting for the environment relative to just litigation. And so we have, the genesis of the Western Environmental Law Center was as a litigation shop. And so virtually 100% of our work at our founding in the early 1990s was litigation based. Over the last 15 years, we have really transformed our model. So if you look at our strategic plan, for example, litigation remains front and center as an opportunity to hold the line against the transgressions of federal or state government or against polluters or others who are exploiting the environment. And we've had great success on that front. Um, Jenna noted the fact that our litigation resulted in the protection of at least temporary, and it may prove ephemeral given this administration, but 10 million acres of public lands from the ravages of oil and gas leasing. But as we approached that litigation, we did so with an eye towards setting precedent authority for change. And then we were able to do that through over 24 cases that we settled or won outright on the merits. During the Biden administration, we leveraged that precedent and authority to push the administration to promulgate new rules. Those new rules have, of course, been eviscerated by the Trump administration, but it is nonetheless an example of how we can use our litigation as a tool to achieve policy progress. A very good example of how we've been able to do that more recently, not with the federal government, of course, but at the state level, is in New Mexico, where in the wake of a Supreme Court decision from 2023, Sackett v. EPA, roughly 95% of New Mexico's waters were left exposed to unbridled pollution. They would not have to get a federal Clean Water Act permit. So working with partners at Amigos Bravos at New Mexico Wild, at the New Mexico Safety Association, Conservation Voters, New Mexico. We advanced legislation with our Senate Majority Leader, Peter Worth, and one of our climate champions in northern New Mexico, my representative, Cristina Ortez. We were able to move legislation that was signed by the governor to put in place a state level pollution discharge prevention system. So we work very intensively now in the legislative arena. We also now are working to implement that bill, SB 21, through the regulatory process. What is the implementation framework for that particular law? But our work isn't just litigation and then the policy advocacy, whether legislative or regulatory in nature. Two key tools that we have identified as an organization are strategic communications. And so we have a fantastic communications team that is working to change the narrative in the West. There is just this immense battle over what the narrative is in this country. And so our communications team is actively engaged with that. They do so in partnership with the coalitions and clients that we work on. Folks who are on this call, I see Ona Porter here on here. I think I saw Jen Krill with Earthworks and Andrew with Earthworks as well. So coalition building, the idea that we build power for change through coalitions. We are a service organization. And so we serve those clients and partners and the communities they themselves represent. So building those coalitions, building a narrative of what we want to see in the world, and then fighting for that narrative through a combination of litigation and policy advocacy, both in front of legislators, but then also in front of regulatory agencies. I see another question in here about Montana, and in particular addressing dynamics in given how regressive, I suppose that is a polite diplomatic way to put it. Montana's legislature and government has been. Two aspects to this, one dealing with wolves, which Aaron, you specifically ask about, and the other dealing on the climate side of the equation. And on the climate side of the equation, of course, WELC was involved with our Children's Trust, and then also other law firms, McGarvey Law Firm in Montana, in representing a bunch of just fantastic, brave youth in a constitutional-based challenge to Montana's lack of action on climate change. And not only lack of action, but action to deprive agencies of the ability to look at climate science. And so we brought that lawsuit with OCT and others, and we prevailed on that. In particular, with a decisive victory before the Montana Supreme Court this past December. So that creates a foundation for us going after what Montana is doing, where the Montana legislature and the governor are bound by the Constitution. They can't pass a law to undermine their own Constitution. On the wolf front, that is going to be primarily a fight at the federal level. We are dealing with the state level dynamics, for example, with predator damage control issues, which is a combination of state agency engagement along with the federal government through its predator damage management control agency. We did recently prevail in our case to compel the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to reconsider whether or not the gray wolf needs to be put back on the Endangered Species Act list. Just because we won that case doesn't mean that they will, in fact, relist wolves. And certainly we do not expect this administration to. But again, this goes to the idea, the notion that we are holding the line against the Trump administration's transgressions while setting precedent and authority for long-term change. So on that wolf front, a key aspect is going to be public support for our work on that front, pushing back against Montana, but also looking for opportunities when we are engaged in that reconsideration of the petitions to relist wolves, that folks are giving that serious consideration. Produced water. Yes. Hey, Teresa. Good to see you in this meeting as well. We are absolutely going to brawl on produced water and any possibility that the oil and gas industry will, they want to discharge what is Orwellianly called produced water. And produced water is just toxic oil and gas wastewater. So when you drill an oil and gas well, you're pumping a bunch of fracking fluids with this proprietary cocktail of contaminants, many of which we do not know, but include forever chemicals, PFAS, and other not so good things, just a noxious cocktail. And what the industry wants to do is they want to treat and commodify it and use that toxic oil and gas wastewater for manufacturing purposes, for agriculture. So they see a revenue stream in this. And unfortunately, political leadership in New Mexico has bought into this idea, including our governor, Governor Lujan Grisham. Now, we fought back against this. We had a big victory earlier this year where we persuaded our Water Quality Control Commission to prohibit the discharge of oil and gas toxic wastewater. The New Mexico Oil and Gas Association immediately challenged that at our state court of appeals. We're in the process of intervening to defend that underlying Water Quality Control Commission rule. But in the meantime, a bigger threat has arisen where an industry consortium has petitioned the WQCC to basically rewrite those rules, even though the ink isn't even dry on those rules. And so we are very much in the fight at the Water Quality Control Commission to prevent this from happening. What we expect at this point is that there will be a rulemaking process. We tried to knock out that rulemaking process entirely a week or two ago, but there was a political fix in because the agency's own technical experts who had supported us in that prior prohibition rulemaking, they were silenced. They were not allowed to even enter an appearance to provide their perspective. And instead, the WQCC or Water Quality Control Commission was persuaded purely by industry. And so we're fighting that fight. We expect a hearing sometime next year on that. So stay tuned. We are intentionally playing a clock game to push back on that. And so we consider that a at least tactical victory that the rulemaking will not take place before, at the very least, March. And we're hoping hopefully sometime in the summer, and maybe it even goes away entirely. We have enlisted political support on that front. Our expectation is that the state land office under Land Commissioner Stephanie Garcia Richard will be defending against the discharge of toxic oil and gas water. Alicia, you have asked about political redistricting. That is outside our wheelhouse. We're not a C4 political entity, but we do know folks who do work on those issues. Groups in New Mexico that would be good to touch base with are, for example, New Mexico Native Vote or CVNM Action Fund or the Sierra Club's C4 lobbying arm. Those are good groups to contact on that front. Other groups also have C4 arms that can engage in that fight. Center for Civic Policy comes to mind. New Mexico Voices for Children, their Action Fund, they have a C4 arm as well. So take a look at those entities. We work with them on the C3 side of the equation, but not on the C4 side of the equation. Looking at the feed. I'll just note on the religious side, that's not going to, we're a public interest law firm, so we're structured in a very particular way under IRS rules. What I will say on this front is that the Trump administration has not done this yet, but there has been a rumor mill that the Trump administration was going to be coming after climate advocacy and environmental advocacy organizations. They have targeted a few already, but there was an expectation that there were going to be executive orders and other sort of broad-based attacks on the nonprofit advocacy community. We have not yet seen that. They're more smaller tactical fights going after particular organizations. And then, of course, the administration has been bogged down in their attacks against academic institutions. Think about their fight against Harvard. Think about their fight against big law firms. Think about their fights against Columbia, other academic institutions. So not sure whether they just have the bandwidth. What's interesting here is that our counterparts, for example, at the Department of Justice that we deal with, they are maxed out. Like they are having to defend so much of the administration's transgressions against challenged because they're so terrible, and they are running into problems in the lower courts, especially the appellate level and the district court level. Not so much the Supreme Court level, which not exactly a great venue for us in this moment right now. They're providing a lot of cover for the administration. And so we're very wary of anything going up to the Supreme Court. But then at the same time, appellate courts and district courts, they are proven to be relatively good venues for us overall as an advocacy organization and in terms of just holding the line in this moment. But I want to go back to the idea that the administration is sort of shooting itself in the foot by undermining all of the federal government agencies because they don't have the capacity to do their bidding. There's no one there to process rulemaking rescissions. There's no one there to defend their rules and executive orders. So they are creating problems for themselves. And so think about this current moment in many respects like a clock game, that we want to fight to a point where we have better terrain to move forward with our positive agenda on Emergent Horizons. And so, we'll see how that plays out. Next year, the midterms, again, we're not a political organization, but the 2026 midterms are coming up fast. There are key deadlines in Congress right now for folks to pay attention to at the federal level that I encourage folks to think about. There's a September 30th deadline for budget bills, and there is an expectation that they will try to move some kind of omnibus package forward on that front. And then after that, there is the prospect of continuing resolutions that could be moved by the end of the year. But the closer and closer we get to the end of this particular Congress, the 119th Congress, the more we get into election season and the more legislators will be focused on reelection rather than on legislating. So there is, in some respects, you could say that there is a fairly narrow window for them to do their evil doing. And so there's a big fight, an intensive fight. And then if we can hold the line in this moment and get to those midterms, and then hopefully those elections turn out well for climate and conservation action, and we get some semblance of balance and checks and balances back. Other questions folks have in the waning moments of this conversation? I provided my contact information. I know that Jenna or Michelle will circulate my slide deck. Happy to see that circulated. Don't hesitate to reach out to me or to other folks at WELC if you have perspective on this. I love to hear from folks all the time. I'm extraordinarily stretched thin right now, so please don't have an expectation of quick responses right now. I'm also a father. I find myself in this very rich period of life, which is a euphemism for saying that I'm stretched thin on the professional front and the personal front, hauling my two teenage kids around to their various athletic events and academic events and friend events. But I will do what I can, and anything anybody sends in, I will certainly read. And we are really looking to integrate perspective from all of you in this meeting and all of our partners in particular. And just a shout out to all the folks on here who are with our partner organizations. If folks can take solace from something, not only the idea that we're working to hold the line, to work within these ruins of the moment, and to work out of them to these emergent horizons. I hope people find some sense of possibility in that, but I hope people take solace in the solidarity that I am seeing, that we are seeing as an organization in the community writ large. Partner organizations are really showing up in this moment. And there is just an immense amount of solidarity that is providing us with inspiration as an organization. So my gratitude to all of our partner and client organizations, and gratitude to all of you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I can't really say it better than Erik, but just much gratitude all around for everyone showing up here. We wouldn't be able to do this work without all of you, and it really is just a team fight here. So thank you so much. And just to mention again, what Jenna had mentioned earlier in our call, that the month of August, all donations to WELC are matched by some lovely business partners of ours. And then I also didn't want to forget the winner of our stainless steel cup was Virginia Johnston. So Virginia, I'll get in touch with you. But yeah, just thanks again, Erik, for everything and being a leader in this moment. We're also lucky to have you and to have everyone on this call. So keep showing up, everyone. And thank you so, so much.